is called, that is quadratic in type. I usually say in quadratic form. This is one of the most powerful tools in mathematics that you have. And it's like our blob worksheet. We're working with blobs. That says I've got something that is not a quadratic that I can turn into one. And if I can make it look like a quadratic, then I could solve it using the quadratic formula, by factoring, by completing the square. I have all kinds of methods to use to solve a quadratic, where if it's a fourth degree polynomial, not so much. Or if I have fractional exponents, not so much. But what you want to look at is for a pattern. It is a trinomial. It could be a binomial. But in this instance, we're going to be working primarily with trinomials. And it says, I'm going to look in, have it being in descending powers of the variable. And then I'm going to look at the variable part of the second term. The guy in the middle. If I square the guy in the middle, do I get the variable part of the first? Yeah. So if I square x squared, I get x to the fourth. That says I can rewrite this guy as a quadratic. And I can make a substitution. And you can use whatever letter you like. As in mathematics, we tend to use U. Many books use T. You could use B for blob. So that says, suppose I let T be equal to that middle variable part. Then if I square that middle variable part, I get x to the fourth. Substituting in x to the fourth is t squared minus 10. T is x squared plus 9 equals 0. That's an equation in quadratic form. And on this particular instance, you can factor them and solve. Very powerful. It's like when we were factoring the blobs. We were able to factor things that looked very, very ugly because we made a substitution. Now, same thing here. The variable part is x to the 1/3. And if I square x to the 1/3, I get x to the 2/3. So x to the 1/3 squared, you multiply the exponents, you get x to the 2/3. So that says this is an equation in quadratic form. So if I let t be equal to x to the 1/3, if I square t, this is x to the 1/3 squared, I get x to the 2/3. So I can make a substitution. This is 5. T squared is x to the 2/3 plus 11t is x to the 1/3 plus 2. But this guy I can do. And by the way, some of you with these guys with squares and cubes, you'll be able to, some of you can factor it without making a substitution, and that's fine. When you get into the fractional exponents and negative exponents and, you know, ugly looking stuff, it's harder to do. So that says, is this an equation in quadratic form? Well, if I take a look at x squared, and if I square x squared, do I get x to the 4th? Yeah. So that says t is going to be x squared. Then if I square both sides, so t square, square the left, square the right, I get x to the fourth. So that says in my problem, wherever I have an x to the fourth, I replace it by t squared. Wherever I have an x squared, I replace it by t. And now I solve that by completing a square, by factoring, by quadratic formula. So this factors. This is t minus 4, t plus 1 equals 0. So that t is 4, t is negative 1. I know what t is, but I don't know my variable is x. Now sometimes in calculus, by the way, we leave it as t, and then we change everything around it to reflect t, because it's easier to work with, and everything's smaller. But oftentimes we bring it back to the original, because we know that if t equals 4, t equals negative 1, what was the original t? X squared. That said x squared equals 4. X squared equals negative 1. Now I can use the square root property on this. Take the square root of both sides. Don't forget the plus or minus. So x equals plus or minus 2. Now right now we do not have imaginary numbers, so we would say this is not a real number. However, I can sneak down here and remind ourselves, if x squared equals negative 1, take the square root of both sides, don't forget the plus or minus. What is x? Plus or minus the square root of negative 1, which is plus or minus I. But for right now, this is what we would write, not a real number. Or NRN, not real number. I know you guys like to NRN, not real number. Like to shortcut stuff.